Dear daughter, I'm writing this as a journal entry because at some point, you might find yourself caught in a cycle you can't understand. And if I'm not here to guide you, I want you to have my words. Not to scare you, but to protect you. Today, I want to share something that often disguises itself as love, something that presents itself subtly, but can trap you in ways you don't even realize. It was an ordinary afternoon, and we were talking. He smiled, that smile that was supposed to be comforting. But then, I brought up something that bothered me, something simple, and instead of listening to me, he looked away, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. The air became thick, and an uncomfortable silence settled between us. I felt my heart race. That silence wasn't just the absence of words. It was a shadow spreading, making me feel like there was something wrong with me for daring to express my feelings. In that moment, I realized something that would change everything. It wasn't love. It was disguised control. The signs might be invisible, but the message was clear. If you have to adjust your emotions to avoid disturbing someone else's peace, that's not love. It's dependency. So let me tell you about the rule I learned in this emotional maze. Pay attention to the shifts in gazes. When words disappear and feelings become heavy, be aware. It usually means that your no is being turned into an emotional debt. The translation is simple. True love doesn't make you feel guilty for taking care of yourself. True love doesn't turn your desires into burdens. The boundary? Always honor your inner voice. If you feel you need to apologize for being who you are, step away from that space. Claim your freedom. Remember, freedom begins with the courage to say no. If you feel you need to apologize for being who you are, step away from that space. Freedom begins with the courage to say no. I remember one morning when he said, "You always do better when you give in a little." His words fell like stones in my stomach, but I smiled. Part of me wanted to believe he was right, that yielding was a form of love. The other part, the one that was starting to wake up, knew that this wasn't how things were supposed to work. It was in that moment that I began to closely observe the small gestures that often went unnoticed. The way he looked at me, not as if I were a complex human being, but as if I were a projection of his expectations, as if I were there solely to fill the space in his perfect life. Sometimes it was hard to notice. He was so charming in public, so affectionate with friends and family. I would wonder, was I exaggerating? Was I really seeing ghosts where there was nothing? But then, upon returning home, when the door closed, the atmosphere changed. It was as if a heavy mood settled in, suffocating and cold. One day, after a heated argument over a trivial matter, I dared to ask why he seemed so distant. He looked into my eyes, but his eyes were empty. "You're just imagining things," he said. And in that moment, I realized the doubt had been planted in me like a poisonous seed, a subtle no that transformed into a desperate yes to avoid disturbing the tranquility he seemed to demand. Those conversations that started light soon became emotional mazes, where I lost myself trying to figure out what was real and what was manipulation. I became an expert at reading between the lines, deciphering looks and silences. The problem was that the more I tried to adjust, the more I lost myself. The lights that once shone inside me began to fade. It was one night, while I watched the rain trickle down the window, that I realized something crucial. I wasn't living my truth. I was living a version of myself that pleased him, a version shaped by fear. When I thought of my passions, my dreams, everything felt distant and jumbled, as if I were looking at a screen covered in fog. I decided it was time for a change. The first step was to recalibrate my inner voice, never allowing it to be silenced again. Gently, I made a list of my needs, desires, and boundaries. It became my mantra. I am important. My feelings are valid. Once, in what could have been an ordinary conversation, I shared a desire. I want to travel alone to see new places. Instead of encouragement, I received a cold stare. Why do you want to do that? Isn't it better for us to be together at all times? There it was, the reflection of the disguised control. What should have been a call to adventure turned into a plea for approval. That look, which once made me feel small, now began to bother me. He didn't want me to grow. He wanted me to stay in the same place, in the same position, like a piece of a puzzle he had assembled. I came to understand the true weight of freedom by deciding that I wouldn't need permission to follow my instincts. One night, courage finally took over me. With a racing heart, I said, "I need space." I feel like I'm losing myself, and that scares me." The response, however, was a storm. He protested, argued, and finally made an emotional appeal. "If you leave, I don't know if I can stay here waiting." Throughout our relationship, I had learned to fear the consequences of hearing my own voice. But that night, I didn't hesitate. A deep impulse guided me. "If you cannot respect my need for space, then I cannot stay." The silence that followed was deafening, but there was something different about it. It was a stillness that came from a place of strength. I was no longer a prisoner of fear. I was in control. What happened next was unexpected. He didn't fight back, but the expression on his face changed. Surprise mixed with anger, as if he were trying to understand the new dynamic. And it was in that moment, between silence and tension, that I realized the transformation was just beginning. If I wanted to break free from the invisible prison I had built around myself, I would have to keep speaking up, listening to my voice, and respecting it. The words that had never been spoken began to flow in my mind, and with each "no," I asserted, the weight of doubt lifted away. Freedom is not just a concept. It is a state of being, a choice, and I chose to be free. So, remember, dear, true strength does not come from submission. It comes from the courage to remain true to yourself, even when the world around you tries to silence you. I continued to explore this newfound freedom I had fought for. The journey wasn't linear, and I knew that the scars of silence ran deeper than I had imagined. There were moments when doubt still haunted me, like shadows dancing on the outskirts of my mind. But as I allowed myself to feel every emotion without fear of judgment, something inside me began to rise again. One night, while talking with a friend about my experience, I realized that I was not alone. She shared her own struggles, how she had lost her dreams because of someone who was supposed to love her. Her distant gaze while she spoke reflected a deep recognition. Sharing our stories felt like opening old wounds, but it was also a balm for our souls. Moments like these showed me that many women carry the burden of imposed silences, and that provided the strength I needed to move forward. Instead of hiding in the shadows, I began to gather with others who were also waking up. Soon, our group became a safe space where we could be vulnerable and powerful at the same time. Amid laughter and tears, we learned how to rewrite our narratives. Once, during a meeting, a friend said something that stuck with me. "Courage is contagious." That phrase resonated within me, igniting a flame of determination. I didn't just want to live my life. I wanted to celebrate this new version of myself. And so I decided to take a step forward. I started a project that I had had in mind for years, something that had been stifled by the subtle control I had faced. I began writing a blog about emotional experiences, daily small victories, and how to recognize the signs of true love. It was like unearthing hidden treasures within me. Each word written was an affirmation of my existence. My writings began to come to life. I wrote about the nuances of saying no, the complexities of human emotions, and the importance of listening to one's own voice. With every post, I realized that my words had the power to free not only myself, but also other women who felt trapped and voiceless. The feedback I received was incredibly encouraging. Some readers opened up, sharing their stories of struggle and transformation. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I faced resistance, especially from my ex. He didn't understand why I was changing. Disguising his dissatisfaction as concern, he sent me messages full of criticism. "You're not the same anymore," he said. Those words used to hit me like an arrow, but now I saw them as echoes from a time that no longer belonged to me. His control no longer held power over me. On one of those difficult days, I sat back down in front of the window, watching the rain trickle down like before. I remembered how much time I had spent trapped in a cycle of doubts and insecurities. Now, each drop seemed to purify me, as if washing away unwanted memories and revealing the clarity I had sought for so long. I understood that growth comes with pain, but also with beauty. And it was on a sunny afternoon, during lunch with my friends, that I felt the strength of my new reality. We were talking about future plans, and I mentioned a trip I wanted to take to a faraway country. Instead of receiving blank stares or questions, they celebrated my desire. The feeling of being supported, of having my voice acknowledged, was refreshing. It was a clear sign that true love was present in friendship, and that I finally belonged to a space where I could be myself. When I recognized this transformation, a smile spread across my face. Every step I took toward freedom was a step toward a new me, a me that says yes to life, and no to fear. So, my dear, if you feel like you need space, if your emotions begin to feel like burdens, don't hesitate to act. Your voice is powerful. Respecting yourself is an act of deep love. You deserve to live without questioning if your emotions are valid. True love doesn't demand sacrifices of your essence. It flourishes in authenticity and mutual respect. Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to grow. And never forget that the light that shines within you is stronger than any shadow someone might try to cast. Wounds can leave marks, but they can also turn into stories of overcoming. And these stories have the power to inspire not only you, but also those around you. Always remember that freedom is not just a destination. It's a journey you choose every day. Choose to be free. Choose to be yourself. And as I reflected on this new freedom, I realized there was another layer to this process. It wasn't just about choosing to be free, but also about understanding what freedom truly meant to me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I noticed the changes not just in my exterior, but in the way I viewed myself. The insecurity that once dominated my life began to dissolve, revealing a strength and resilience I didn't know I had. One night, while reviewing some of my posts, one caught my attention. I had written about how we all carry invisible scars. These marks are not merely reminders of pain, but also testimonies of overcoming. Each word written was a layer of healing, a way to transform difficult experiences into wisdom. And there, on that illuminated screen, the truth became clear. I was not just a survivor. I was a warrior. That's when I decided to take a bold step. I planned a gathering where women could share their stories, a space for them to be heard and recognized without fear of judgment. I chose a small cafe with outdoor tables, blooming and sunny, a refuge where every laugh could echo as a celebration of life. When the day arrived, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Some friends helped me organize everything, and soon a diverse group gathered. Women of different ages, experiences, and backgrounds, all brought together by a single purpose: to rediscover their own voices. It was moving to see these women start to open up, each sharing her story and feeling embraced. Amid tears and laughter, I began to notice a pattern. Each woman's pain was unique yet, at the same time, familiar. And it was in that space of vulnerability that I realized something fundamental. Strength doesn't come solely from individuality, but also from connection. The energy flowing among us was palpable. With every story shared, a piece of the emotional puzzle for each of us fell into place. We began to support one another, reaffirm our truths, and as a result, the transformation deepened. By the end of the gathering, when the last words were spoken and smiles spread around the room, I looked around and realized we were all connected by an invisible thread of empathy and love. One woman turned to me and said, "Thank you for creating this space. I've never felt that my experiences were valid until now." In that moment, my heart was filled with gratitude. The true beauty of freedom doesn't just lie in living for oneself, but in allowing others to carve out their own space as well. From that day forward, I knew my path was not solely mine. It was a collective journey. And so, I will continue to choose to be free, but even more importantly, to inspire others to do the same. Because freedom is an act of love that resonates. Choose to be yourself. Choose to be part of that light that shines brightly, illuminating the way for all of us.